This week's episode of the Ken and Ben Show, we talk about Elon Musk's exit from the administration,
Joni Ernst takes a crap on stage and ruins her career.
terrorist groups in the United States. Are they left? Are they right?
Welcome to the pod.
Let's get into it.
Here we have Elon Musk saying, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know what you did wrong. You know it. Or you know you did wrong. You know it." And he's absolutely right. I mean, yeah, there's some nuance we'll get into about it, but as a general statement, he's absolutely correct because it goes against everything that they've been campaigning on, and that is reducing the spending just as much as it is reducing the government, and they're both tightly intertwined.
I think it's just funny, though, somebody like Elon Musk sounding like the old school GOP guys, right? The guys that get laughed at by the current administration, right?
Well, no, not necessarily, because people like Chip Roy, for example, are totally beloved. I was lucky enough to get to meet him when he was out supporting Ron DeSantis during the primary season for the 2024 election. And he's a great guy. I like him a lot. And he doesn't give a crap what anybody else thinks. He's dug in on his morals, his principles, and what he thinks his constituents want.
But Chip Roy isn't in Trump's inner circle.
That's
Partially because of the DeSantis thing, right? But also,
Sure.
like, it,
Trump never attacks him, though.
but he's not being taken seriously, right, when it comes to the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, so. He does hold some weight, clearly, but it's just, yeah, it's so.
And it's so strange to me, though, like, obviously Musk is fiscally conservative, which I can relate to, but first failing to find the trillion he was aiming for, right? And then seemingly the relationship between him and Trump sort of disintegrating, and then obviously he had to leave the White House at some point, right? Like, that's the position that a special government employee has to, right? The 120 days or whatever. But
130.
to go out like this and then sort of have the freedom to say what he wants about the administration, specifically on this topic.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's pretty obvious timing. The fact that he had already said that in a lighter form just a few days ago, or was it a week ago or something? He didn't have nice things to say about it before, but once he's officially out of the White House and he can really just say how he feels, then he really laid it down with that tweet.
He also seemed hesitant to talk about it. I can't remember what publication was doing an interview with him, but it was at Boca Chica at the SpaceX factory when they sat down to do the interview, and the interview started out with them talking about the big beautiful bill and like how he feels about Trump and all this other stuff, and he was like super uncomfortable. Like, you could just see it's like, this isn't what we discussed, and the reporter's like, I talked with your publicist, they didn't say anything about it not being on the table. It was just, it seemed like he was hesitant, but now on Twitter he's free to spread his wings.
Yep. On his own platform. Yeah, so it's really hard to honestly disagree with Elon's tweet. If you're having a responsible approach to government and how we're funding stuff, and just the amount we're putting into it and the effect it's going to have on all of us, we can't keep spending more. And I know the Republicans that are working on this and defending it are all saying, oh, well, it looks like that, but it doesn't mean we're actually going to spend it. Well, when have we ever been able to trust that before? If they're allowed to spend it, they always do. And this bill allows extra spending. And so it makes complete sense why Elon's frustrated with it, because that's not what he signed up for.
I also am a little frustrated at the fact that like it took him leaving his position to say it. Like when you had more influence when you were inside before the vote happened, like that would have been the time to say it. Now that it's passed, right? Like
Well, that's where the nuance comes in because it would have been way more likely to, put fuel towards Republican civil war before they get the bill out. Um, Most likely, yes, it would have done that more so if he were to say that while he's still so closely associated with Trump, because it would be them saying completely different things. Trump saying it's the big beautiful bill, we must pass it, and I must sign it on July 4th, and then we'd have Elon saying no, this isn't ready yet. This is the ugliest bill I've ever seen.
well, I also think that takes better planning on the administration's part about airing this stuff out before you put it out onto the floor.
Yeah, exactly. That there's different kind of flavors of that though, and having a way more aggressive kind of internal friction like that can make it even harder to get something done than if you were to have a more mild friction by waiting till the association's not as tight. But Trump, the main guy behind the bill, who wants the bill more than anybody else, if he's not side by side with him every other day giving press conferences, and then it'd be that closely aligned with him at the time and associated with him, and then for him to be saying the opposite, that's a way more aggressive and like hostile kind of friction where that can make it harder to accomplish anything, whether it's revising the bill, cutting stuff out of it entirely, adding new things.
I'm going to disagree here in the fact that they have complete control, right? Like, it was going to pass no matter what state it was in.
Oh, they barely passed the House.
I think it would have been easier to pass had the fiscally conservative of the Republican caucus could have, peeled back some of the pork that's in it.
Like they claim they want to do. Yeah, and we just had one Republican that voted. No. We had one Republican vote left to spare. It was barely past the House. And from what I understand, it's pretty much guaranteed to get through the Senate. The House was the difficult part.
Yeah. And it usually is. Speaking of the Senate.
Oh, boy.
So, last Friday, Joni Ernst at a town hall was answering a constituent's question about the big, beautiful bill and how it was going to affect Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. And what I assume that she answered somebody else yelling out from the crowd that people are going to die with, we're all going to die.
Yeah, and which, to any sane person, except for Matt Walsh, that's the worst possible response you could have had. There's literally nothing worse you could have said that realistically anybody was going to say. It's crazy that she actually really said that. It's funny because I watched Matt Walsh break this down just the other day, and he was saying it's the only time he's ever been able to applaud something that Joni Ernst has said or done, and probably the last time. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Matt Walsh's sense of humor, but you're obviously speaking to, if folks don't know, geriatric state is Iowa. Iowa's a geriatric state, much like Florida, but more corn.
Yeah, and
so there's a lot of folks in these town halls that are concerned about their health care.
will this cause Iowa to flip blue or become more purple?
I think you're getting a little too far into it. We'll discuss that in a bit because I have some polling about it to talk about.
Yeah, just put in the comments. What do you think? Will midterms show Iowa turning super purple, maybe even blue?
So Joni obviously got a bunch of backlash about the town hall statement. So the next day, she recorded a Facebook reel or an Instagram. I can't remember exactly. Walking through a cemetery, and she apologized for speaking reality. That she, really was thankful she didn't have to bring up the tooth fairy, because we're not adults and don't know already that we're all going to die. But did say that if we were really concerned about dying, that we should embrace Jesus for an everlasting life as an apology to the outrage, doubling down, which works out for a lot of other Republicans, notably higher up, but it didn't seem to work out for Joni.
Well, the thing is, she's always been cringe. So it wouldn't have mattered what she tried to do, it would not have gone well. But if she would have just kind of like lightly backtracked or even like half apologized, not really, it would have been cringe as well too, but people have been more quiet about it. But
So
she drew so much attention to herself by just being so ridiculously, overwhelmingly cringe.
here's my response to that being cringe. As somebody who followed her during her initial campaign, I was next to her during her debate here in Iowa, and she has this very polished veneer. In this case, I think this is the real Joni coming out, is the thing, right? Like, she normally has like the Iowa nice face on, and she's finally letting it drop because she's tired, right? The Republicans have been getting beat up all over the place, and she's finally having town halls, which was not advised. And yeah, she got beat up, and I think she's just not having a good time about it. But it's the real Joni, which is refreshing, to be honest, seeing a politician be real and not polished.
It's just kind of weird to me that she got voted in the first place, because she's really just such a lackluster political figure. Doesn't really come off like a leader. Doesn't really come off like somebody inspirational or trustworthy. She doesn't have like that the X factor where
I think, though, her opponent, which, forgive me, I can't remember their name, was a nobody, hence why I can't remember their name. And coming off the heels of Tom Harkin, right? Like, she was in the Iowa Guard. She was a high-ranking official in the Iowa Guard, right? So she had military experience. She was polished, right? Again, that whole politician veneer. So when she spoke, it seemed very professional, and coming off the heels of Tom Harkin, who's an extremely well-spoken man, right? It made sense. But now yeah. The political climate has definitely changed for the Republican Party.
oh, tremendously. It's crazy to see it all happen in our lifetime, and to see something so dramatic like it's something I often think on is in the future, and I know a lot of people do. It's kind of like super cliche thought experiment. It's just, how are people going to be taught about this time period in their civics classes, half a century from now? And people are going to describe this time as a really crazy time. Like, we're at this massive turning point in technology, politics, economics, world trade, just general foreign policy.
I think, though, it's a bit cyclical-ish, right? Like, obviously, we're in the midst of another industrial revolution, but there are some things that rhyme about it, right? Like the rise of populism. Obviously, like, there's always been a little bit of it in the United States. We do love populism quite a bit, but this seems like the political environment is very much so what's popular for the least common denominator, right? The voting public isn't, I wouldn't say not educated, but they're going off of vibes rather than policy. You know what I mean?
Democrats are the worst with that.
don't even start with me with that, because
I worked on my fair share of campaigns for Democrats,
But-
and it's always just vibes. Why do you think Pete Buttigieg won Iowa over Bernie?
but so much of MAGA runs off of vibes. They don't care about the facts regarding the situation, right? They see their man on the hilltop, praise be he, and just do whatever and
Facts.
back him for the vibe, right?
Facts are why people become maggots.
No. I think most people that are fact-based in their belief system are Democrats based on educational statistics.
No. Kenny, no.
No?
Put in the comments. Let us know if you see this. Who bases their ideology off of facts more than the other? Republicans or Democrats? Let us know. Let's see who wins in the comments. Now let's see who wins between me and Kenny.
I don't think I've ever heard a MAGA Republican use data for anything.
It's top of the dome.
Inclu-
Common sense.
Includes you.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Have you ever cited a thing when speaking?
Yeah, of course. They've even supplemented some to you when you couldn't remember.
I think it's that Trump is aligned with people that are a part of these organizations, right? And that these organizations in mass vote for Donald Trump, right? And support his policies. Therefore, his policies are racist.
No, because look at all of the liberal terrorists, domestic terrorists that are completely 100% super aligned with the current Democratic Party platform.
So, shooting people at a Jewish event and a guy setting people on fire at Boulder, right? That's two.
Free, free Palestine.
But the Patriot Front has held rallies, which, if you don't know, the Patriot Front is a white nationalist group.
Those are feds.
You sure?
Absolutely positive. Have you actually looked at the footage of them?
Yeah, I have. Matter of fact, I've seen them in person in Des Moines while I was there.
You see how when they do their like marches, they have a police protection squad that lets them escape into the subway and nobody sees where they left to?
Well, and no, here in Iowa they didn't, right? They all got into a U-Haul. Yeah, like some sort of redneck fucking Uber.
Well, that's why what I think's the most plausible thing is it started off as something very small and very legit, and it got artificially blown up by the feds under the Biden administration, and they just copied what they were doing, and they made it look like they had a lot of supporters in the big marches, because there's no other way that would explain the actual videos of the marches and the police helping them.
Because they filed their paperwork. Oh, a white person in America knows how to file their paperwork? Jeez.
That's racist.
Is it? Or is it that they actually know how to work the systems which they help create / maintain?
The thing is, they did not have the authority to block off the subway system to everybody.
So
The police did it so that nobody. They were instructed to not let anybody see where these people went. It was a way for them to have all these people come in.
under the condition,
identities hidden.
under the condition, because if you actually look at what these people are talking about, they firmly believe that hiding their identity is key to their First Amendment right, which they have argued in court, and that's why it's the way it is. But on the bringing receipts part, there is close to 300, a little over 320 white hate groups that are right-leaning, being that they're Christian nationalists, right, purist, right-leaning ideologies here in America.
Yeah, but
There is approximately 200, just over 200, left-leaning hate groups like black separatists, Antifa, things like that in America.
Yeah, but how many people are in these groups? Because I see videos of Antifa everywhere stirring up trouble with everything. So there's obviously, you don't see the Patriot Front or the Proud Boys showing up at literally everything and causing violence and harassing people. And then fortunately lately I've actually been starting to see legal repercussions. Macing people, pepper spraying people. Antifa has a lot of people that, so many people, they can attend pretty much anything across the entire country. And they do. And they're incredibly violent. They hurt people physically all the time. People just exercising their right to protest. It happens all the time. There's millions of examples of it.
So the reason why Antifa exists, right, and this is based, same thing what I did with the Patriot Front, researching what they do and why. Antifa does this because they feel that people's right to protest was infringed upon, and they need to counter anti-riot stuff, right? Because police were using riot tactics against peaceful protesters, so Antifa started showing up to these things.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I'm not talking even about cops. Put that all the way to the side. Them attacking cops, totally separate. They're attacking other protesters. And not just because they're anti-protesting. They show up as the anti-protesters more often, it seems, than they do as the original protesters.
So you're talking about Antifa showing up to the Westboro Baptist Church to punch them in the face.
Well, fuck them. Yeah, that's the only good thing they've probably ever done.
So you, in your mind, can make sense of somebody showing up to a protest to punch somebody in the face when their ideology sucks, right? So that's what they're doing.
No. I would say that whoever did that still needs to be locked up. But it's just like if a dude's trying to look up a girl's skirt at the bar and some guy comes up and punches him and knocks him out or kills him on accident, and it's gonna be like, well, that dude was fucking creep. But,
Yeah.
But the person that accidentally killed him in one punch still needs to go to jail.
I think it's shades of gray at that point, right? Like, but my statement from last podcast still stands. There is way more right-wing terrorists in this country than there are left. Purely from the fact of there are way more in that group. In the fact that, like, out of all of the people that participate in these groups, white people are still the majority, right? And I'm not saying all white people are bad, right? But if a certain percentage of each group is a part of a hate group, well, there's more white people to be a part of a hate group.
Yeah, but...
And especially around where we are, where I'm not trying to dox it, right? There's literally a hate group 2 hours from where we're filming this podcast. And they have over 200 people that show up to that church. And it's funny enough, a Norse mythology white supremacist, only Germanic descent.
Well, and that's horrifying, but you still cannot convince me that Antifa does not have an incredibly larger amount of people that participated under the umbrella of Antifa. Whether just because they saw a post on Reddit and they got hooked in and they just wanted to dress up and they didn't really do anything, or the people that are organizing it themselves. But anybody associated with Antifa, I'm sure that alone dwarfs pretty much half or all of the white nationalist groups. Yes, there's white nationalist racist people in the country.
How many Proud Boys showed up to J6? Hundreds. And that's just the ones that were able to get there.
Yeah, how often do you see them other places, all the way across the nation?
Well, ever since Gavin McGinnis had to run away with his tail between his legs and the other guy got thrown in prison.
So here's an interesting one. I want to know what you think. How do you feel about the 20-year sentence for not even being there?
It's tough, right? Because very clearly his actions led to violence, right? Like calling for violence is a punishable crime, right?
By 20 years because he made a tweet? That's pretty crazy.
Not even just that, right? But also the other parts of the context of organizing, right? And like enabling these people to do the stuff. It was more than just a tweet. It was his role as a leader, right? And the same thing with the Oath Keepers, right? Like it's not that the leaders specifically did anything wrong, it's being the head of the organization and being held responsible for that organization's actions.
Okay, do you think he got more or less due process than an illegal criminal migrant?
I think he got more because an illegal migrant gets shipped to El Salvador without going before a judge.
But then who gave them the deportation orders that pretty much all of them had?
ICE.
And
Because ICE, just like the ATF, goes flippant of the law and does what they are ordered to do.
but what about all the deportation orders that were issued under the Biden administration?
You mean the ones that they actually went before a judge after they got captured by ICE instead of shipped off? And then after the judge talked to them and they had representation, then they got deported?
And also issued a deportation notice.
Yeah.
And so
They
that means that they're allowed to be deported?
They still went before a judge and had their case listened to and had representation. That's all due process means. It's not that they shouldn't be deported.
Yeah, but a lot of these people being deported are that, including the the amazing dad from Maryland that beat his wife.
What about the hairdresser?
Well, I'm sure he's having a pretty bad time right now.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. So, and isn't one of the tenets of our judicial system that we should let 100 people that are guilty go to make sure that no innocence gets taken in?
Oh yeah, no, I think that they should be a bit more careful. I think we just need to build new facilities to be able to. If you break into the country illegally, I don't think you should just be able to roam around.
I kind of agree with that, right? Like, you should have a place in the United States for this process to take place, not El Salvador, right? Like, because that's so. And I spoke with this with my dad, who's also a Republican, not a MAGA Republican, mind you, but
not yet.
That never, literally never. But that he also agreed that these people needed to be shipped out of the country and that their home countries weren't going to take them. So Trump just shipped them off to somewhere that would. And that feels so un-American to me in the fact that A, that they were denied due process, but B, we aren't even the ones doing the punishment. That we're not the ones responsible for these people's care, because at the end of the day, they're still people. They violated the law, sure, but you can't A, prove that they did without a judge, and
Which
B,
they got.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. None of those people in El Salvador went before a judge before getting put on a plane and shipped to El Salvador.
But that's how they had their deportation orders.
None of them went before a judge. Just like if you got a speeding ticket, you have the right to go to the courthouse.
Well, they sure.
Just like our friend who is an immigrant, who's not a citizen, has the right to go before a judge.
Because he came here legally. The thing is, they sure didn't want any...
The Constitution applies to everybody. The Constitution applies to everyone in our borders. That's the point. The rights enumerated in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are not descended from the government, but from God.
True, but they sure didn't want any due process while they were getting in here. But now they want it all of a sudden.
You get due process. That's the point.
Yeah, but the thing is, where does the real blame fall here, though? I think it's on Biden because he let them into the country knowing this could be their fate.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of Democrats, even at the top, that are admitting that, right? That saying that mishandling the border is partially why that they have such a bad branding problem at the moment, right? There are so many things that regular Americans that are in the middle are disenfranchised about, including the border problem. Now, treating these people as subhuman is not
I don't
right.
agree with that at all. Like the barber guy, let him stick around. But
Well, the barber guy had a do not deport order that was ignored,
yeah, and I don't agree with that. That's the thing is, it's
which, if he had gone before a judge, would have been presented.
that's why I started off with. I did say that I wish they'd be a little bit more careful, and not only that, but we all need to demand that they're a bit more careful. And if they need, with all the money that Elon saved, if they really also keep their promise and not to blow up all the money that they allowed themselves to spend, if this big beautiful bill passes, they would have more than enough money to build a few gigantic facilities along the border that aren't just cages and actually are like reasonable living quarters for human beings.
I also think that you're going to run into a NIMBY problem, right? Because we already have that problem with prisons today, where no state wants to be the face of what can be considered a concentration camp, right?
Texas.
That's part of, no, it didn't happen because that's why they're in El Salvador.
No, I really don't think that anybody is willing to try to get everybody on board with spending hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe a couple billion on those giant facilities. Because they'd have to be massive and you would need several of them. And they'd have to be built in less than 4 years. They need to be done in 18 months from now.
And I think that's why Trump was looking at alternatives, right? Resurrecting Alcatraz or, Guantanamo Bay, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
and,
Chicken meat
I'll-
sandwiches.
I'll give him credit. He's being creative, but it's not a good look.
But he's trying. He's trying, Kenny. But yeah, not trying hard enough on that for sure. Because yeah, no human deserves to be treated subhuman, even if it's a means to an end. I know you're not Hassan, and I'm not either. And he has literally just said that. I think it was a few days ago. He was like,
Anytime that you bring the phrase a means to an end, it is literally going to end poorly. Anytime in history that phrase has been used, it has never worked out great, and you are always looked down upon in the history books.
oh yeah, and it's the golden rule. Like, you can't be like, okay, I guess we have to sacrifice these people's livelihoods or their lives, and then not expect that same energy to come back to you, because you won't be agreeing with it if you're the one it's happening to. And that's also why, like I said, and 2 times now I've conceded that, yeah, like, not only do I wish that they would be a bit more careful, we all need to demand it. And I can say that while also simultaneously be happy that we at least started something, but we need to correct the mistakes. And we need to go back for the people that were mistreated and pull them out of the bad situation. And in some of the more egregious cases, they need to be compensated. And you know what? Any of the mistakes, or like the barber guy, I think they should be brought back in, super insanely thorough background check, and just given citizenship and $10,000 to start off their life here.
I don't know if that's the solution either, to be honest.
Well, that would be impossible to get that passed. Well, not really, but it would. That's a long shot, and it's just a nice thought. That's all it is. I know it's not going to happen, but
But also, like, put yourself in their shoes. Do you think that they want to come back here after that?
yes.
I think
absolutely.
I think if
they
I
do.
I think if I was sent to an El Salvadoran prison by this country with no due process, I'm going to Canada or something, man. Like, that's just what it is.
How do you think they're going to get there? Have you ever seen what Canadian border security looks like?
I think there's plenty of people in the Canadian government that would make an exception, right?
Oh, yeah,
There's
yeah, for a political statement.
Yes, and we do it here too all the time.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, I think that's all the time we have for this week's podcast.
Please like, subscribe, follow our channel, help us to grow. We have a whole lot more to talk about on the next episode of the Ken and Ben Show.
And join the conversation. I would be happy to read the comments, give us topics that you want us to talk about, or, if you want to give a shit, give a shit. If we're wrong on something, let us know.
Even one comment. We would be happy with one comment. If you are that person, leave a comment on this video and a like, subscribe, bell notification, and we'll see you on the next one.